Knowing if your piercer's clean and safe. Part 3, Decontamination. Body piercing basics, episode number 15, coming up right now. First off, if you are new to the channel and don't know who I am, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located in Des Moines, Iowa, inside the Skin Kitchen. So when I'm talking to you about this, I'm talking about years of experience of what I've developed to work best for me and to improve the safety of myself, my fellow employees, and my clients, of course. This is in no way, shape designed to give you a education on how to properly do this. This is more about educating you on the steps that happen behind the scenes to ensure that your health is protected and the health of your piercer. If you are considering going into piercing as a profession, I really highly suggest that you seek out somebody and go through an apprenticeship. I am not a big fan of DIY at-home piercings. You do not have the level of expertise to do things correctly. However, this is designed so that when you go in and you are talking to your piercer and you ask some specific questions, you'll know whether or not they're being safe or not. So let's start out with kind of basically what goes on during the piercing procedure and when this comes into play. The initial piercing, there's kind of 8 steps to it. If you go through the procedure based on what I do personally. The first step being the consultation, where we sit down and discuss advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons, what it's going to involve to do the piercing, what it's going to involve to heal the piercing, and sizing of jewelry, price, all that fun stuff and information you should have before making a decision on whether or not the piercing is right for you. Next stage would be going through picking out jewelry and then going through the waiver. When I go through the waiver, I'm going to ask you specific questions that may impair me from doing the piercing, like diseases, etc. that you may have, or health complications, medication, allergic reactions to certain types of material, and etc. Next, I'll do the setup, and I talked a little bit about that in some former videos. Then we do the piercing, or actually disinfect the area the piercing area using a surgical scrub, mark the piercing, and then do the piercing. Once the piercing is done, we'll stop any bleeding that may occur, clean up the area, and then I always turn to my setup. First thing I always do is get rid of the thing that can never be used again, in possibly the most contaminated and dangerous item that is left over from a piercing. That would be a piercing needle. Piercing needles are designed to only be used once. That's why they're called single use. The reason for this is a couple of different things. First off, the needle loses the sharpness of its point immediately after it is used. So to reuse it is going to cause a great deal of pain and discomfort to anybody else that you try to pierce with that needle. It is basically useless. The other reason why we do not consider it a reusable tool is because of the danger that's involved with having a sharp point that's been contaminated with blood-borne pathogens and trying to figure out how to handle that and clean it in a way that is not going to cause a needle strike or cause me or my fellow employees or whoever else comes in contact with it of being exposed to whatever foreign pathogen that particular client had. So they are disposed of immediately as medical waste into a rigid sharps container, biohazard container, and then disposed of accordingly by a professional contracted medical waste disposal company. Basically, they heat it up and melt it and shrink it down to something about the size of a hockey puck, and then I believe it goes in a concrete bunker underground after that. Basically, they take care of it. Other items that will be left over from a piercing would be paper products, gauze, Q-tips or cotton tip applicators, and various other things that are disposable. They are also single use. They are disposed of accordingly into a bin that is considered contaminated waste. The items that are left over, things like forceps, hemostats, pliers, opening and closing pliers, various different types of pliers, guide pins, needle receiving tubes, taper pins, etc., are made of materials like implant grade surgical stainless steel that is rigid, built for durability, and can be reused multiple times. They are placed or submerged in a hard surface cleaner inside of a rigid plastic container where they're left overnight. Hard surface cleaners like Maticide, Copcocide, and various different ones, there's a lot of them on the market, are designed to basically, it's considered decontaminated or disinfected within usually about 30 minutes of contact. It's considered sterile within roughly, I think it's 12 hours. I'd have to look it up. Basically, what we're doing is we are decontaminating it, disinfecting those tools, and sterilizing them, which really it isn't. And then, so that when we handle it, when we go through the cleaning process, which I'm going to go into here in a little bit, and rebag them to sterilize them, we are eliminating as many possibilities of us coming in contact with those contaminants. So it's for our safety that we basically sterilize it twice, first liquid and then in any hospital grade sterilizer. This is in no way, shape, or form is liquid sterilization a substitute for good old-fashioned autoclaves and etc., where we are 100% sure that the items that are inside there are free of pathogens. The reason being is a couple of different things. First off, hard surface cleaners, liquid cleaners, have a limited shelf life. If they are used for more than 28 days, they lose their effectiveness. There's also the other issue of, because we're constantly putting contaminated items in there, of overstressing the chemical's ability to actually kill off foreign pathogens and other microorganisms. The other problem with it is, and I have seen it happen in piercing studios in the past, especially when I first started, where they just didn't have the money for an autoclave or what have you, where they would use liquid sterilization, is they would take contaminated items, put it in there, and then the next person would come in and they would pull out what was supposedly sterile pair of forceps to use on the next person. My question is, how do you know which one of those were actually in there for overnight and which ones were just put in there? The same thing goes for any type of pliers or tools that are used to adjust jewelry. They should be sterilized properly. They should not be used constantly stored in liquid hard surface cleaners. The other problem with hard surface cleaners is they can cause a breakdown in the surgical stainless steel finish, especially in joints or hinges or areas where there is a joint in that particular tool, and cause corrosion. So soaking those items in that for a long period of time can cause problems, including it leading to a rust. And rust leads to, boys and girls, tetanus, lockjaw. So, once that, generally what I'll do is I'll soak the reusable tools overnight. Then I will take them out and rinse them, try to get as much of the hard surface cleaner off them as possible under running water, and then I transfer them into another bath filled with an industrial detergent. Then we scrub it underwater. Yes, I said underwater, with a usually a like a toothbrush type brush, Sometimes wire brush I'll use occasionally if I really need to get in there and get it off. Underwater, applying enough pressure to remove any type of blood tissue, any tissue, anything that may have been left over from the piercing, including some of the lubricant or whatever else might have gone in there, blood spray, etc. Then we rinse them again under running water and then transfer it into an ultrasonic tank and run that cycle, which will even deeper clean and remove anything that has hardened or collected on the utensils, the tools. Then rinse under running water again, and then they are left to air dry, usually overnight. Sometimes they air dry a little bit faster. It depends on the amount of equipment that's in the tub. Once again, with the air dried things, I use rigid plastic, easily to dispose of, fairly cheap, airtight Tupperware style or Gladware style containers. Then, once that's done, we start wrapping them by placing them in self-sealing pouches, and then put it in an autoclave and sterilize it and store it till the next time we need it. I'll be going into what exactly sterilization is, how an autoclave works, next episode. I hope you learned something. I hope this was educational, and the next time you go in and you talk to your piercer, or you're trying out a new piercer or what have you, you can have that discussion about how they take care of their tools, how they decontaminate their tools between each usage, and ensure your safety. If you enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up. That's like applauding. It tells me you learned something. If, for whatever reason, you have additional information or you have a question about something in the procedure that you feel like I didn't cover enough or what have you, please leave a message below in the comments section. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, or learn something new. If you have some new information that is contrary to what I just talked about, please feel free to go ahead and comment on that. I love learning new stuff. The other thing is, please subscribe. We post this particular episodes of Body Piercing Basics. Comes out pretty much every Friday. We post between 3 and 4 videos a week covering body piercing and tattooing. But until next time, if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your piercing needs in the future.